FSR 2.0 is a game changer. At least it will be once developers implement it, but we don't need to be sitting around waiting for them. No, we don't. Oh hey, I'm TechDweeb, what's up? So yeah, for those that aren't familiar with FSR 2.0, let me explain it. Actually, I'm not gonna bother. I made a whole video on FSR 2.0, so go watch that if you wanna, know the complicated stuff about how it works. The short version is that it's upscaling tech. It lets us run games at lower resolutions and upscale them to higher resolution with some intelligent algorithms that make it look way better after it's upscaled. NVIDIA's DLSS is an amazing upscaler, but it only works on fancy, high-end NVIDIA RTX GPUs. For anyone else, like an older NVIDIA GPU or AMD GPU users, yeah, they've been stuck with the less good FSR. The original FSR, FSR 1.0, which didn't look great, but hey, it was better than nothing. However, step aside FSR 1.0, there's a new FSR in town. It's called FSR 2.0. The big difference between 2.0 and the older 1.0 is that 2.0 is temporal upscaling, which means that it not only enlarges and enhances the frames of your game, it also takes data from multiple frames. And using some fancy computational math that I totally do understand, it makes it look better. So much better, in fact, that it can compete with NVIDIA's super fancy stuff, DLSS. And unlike DLSS, it does not require a high-end RTX GPU. It runs on any GPU. Which brings us to Cyberjunk. Cyberjunk does not have FSR 2.0 implemented. It has DLSS and FSR 1.0, but an actual IRL wizard has found a way to hackify FSR 2.0 into Cyberjunk. So we don't need to wait around for the Cyberjunk developers to implement it. We can use it right now, which gives the developers some time to fix a few of the minor issues that Cyberjunk has. I mean, it's not a full implementation. It's kind of hacky and there's some work to be done. There isn't motion blur on the ultra-wide resolutions, for instance, and there are some weird things with the graphics. Very minor things, but they're definitely there. I'll show you that later in the video. However, all things considered, it actually works great. And just being able to run Cyberjunk with FSR 2.0 means that people gaming on older GPUs or AMD GPUs or Intel GPUs, they don't need to wait for official support. Isn't that awesome?
Yay!
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's take it one step at a time. First, I'm going to show you the mod, how to install it. Then we'll give it a full test and compare it to the other upscaling tech that we have at our disposal. The mod was developed by a wizard named Potato of Doom 1337, which is probably the best username, ever. I think we can all agree on that. Potato of Doom 1337 himself. Or herself, I suppose. Or their self, I guess. Let's go with that. Potato of Doom, their self, calls this a proof of concept, just to see if such a mod is even feasible. And yes, it totally is. The mod attempts to replace DLSS with FSR 2.0, and they say they got double the FPS when running FSR 2.0 at 4K compared to native 4K. Let's read the words of the developer. Both FSR 2.0 and NVIDIA DLSS are temporal upscalers and work, except for some minor differences, very similar. This means that both systems need similar data to work. Luckily, NVIDIA publishes its DLSS implementation as a dynamic library, a DLL file. This allows us to simply replace the DLL in question with our own version that is able to translate NVIDIA DLSS to FSR 2.0 commands. And one more thing that I found exciting from the FAQ on the mods page, is it possible to add this hack to other games? Yes. Any game that uses DLSS 2.0 should work with this technique after a bit of work. Freaking awesome, man. There's lots of games that use DLSS 2.0 that don't have FSR 2.0 implemented yet. Or maybe they never will. This is good news, that we might actually someday be able just to swap out the DLSS with FSR to get it working on any GPU. Man, I love these internet wizards. They just make magic happen. Okay, let's get this thing installed and see what it can do. The installation is super simple, like crazy simple. Check it out. You just gotta download the RAR file from the website, linked below, and then unrar it to the game directory. It puts the DLL file we need into the same folder as the game's exe file, and it puts 2 registry overrides into the game directory. All you have to do to enable it is open the enable override, and to turn it off, you run the disable override. Pretty dang easy, right? Let's do some tests as a baseline. I'm going to be running at 1440p for these tests. First, we'll test everything on my beastly GPU, which is an RTX 3080, and then we'll swap it out for an older GTX 1060 that does not have DLSS capabilities, and we'll see if it can help us out. So on my 3080, running with the Ultra preset without upscaling, my little benchmark walk through the cherry blossom market gives us an average of 63 FPS. So that's our baseline. Here's a close-up of this little food stand, so you can get a good look at what it looks like without any upscaling. Now, when we enable balanced DLSS, we go up to 81 FPS. The game still looks great, as you can see. When I look very close, I can see hints that this is an upscaled image, but honestly, it's not very noticeable at all. Here's our food stand, zoomed in, and even zoomed in, it's hard to tell that it's running balanced DLSS. I don't know that I'd pick it out right away if I didn't know. Oh, we should probably try out FSR 1.0, right? Well, our frame rate does go up from native and from DLSS. We get like 99 FPS on average, but dang, that's pretty gross. When you look close. Look at our food stand, especially when there's movement. It's pretty smudgy. FSR 1.0 is probably better looking than running at native lower resolutions, but it does not hold up well under close scrutiny. Not nearly as good as DLSS. Okay, so that's our baseline. Now, let's enable FSR 2.0 and see what happens. We just need to run that config file first and then start up the game. Once we're in, we can just enable DLSS, and this should give us FSR 2.0, and yeah, wow, that looks great. We're getting 86 FPS average. So compared to DLSS, we get better FPS. Although I could tell the upscaling isn't quite as nice looking as DLSS upscaling when you look really close. But come on, man. This is pretty darn close. Look at our food counter. That's almost as good as DLSS, which is what I found when I compared DLSS to FSR 2.0 in Deathloop. We're getting some flickering here that we didn't get with DLSS, but nothing drastic. Fantastic stuff. But the real value of this mod isn't replacing DLSS with FSR on GPUs that can do DLSS. If you have DLSS, then just use DLSS. There's no need to use FSR 2.0. But what about a GPU that can't do DLSS? So let's swap out that RTX 3080 for an old GTX 1060 and see what happens. The GTX 1060 is a much weaker GPU. We're gonna stick with 1440p for this test, but I wouldn't recommend running at 1440p if you have a 1060. 1080p is probably the max resolution you'd want to use. I did have to bump the settings down to low though, or else it was just a slideshow. So our Cherry Blossom Market benchmark walk gave us an average of 22 FPS. That's not great. Not really playable. I think we can all agree on that. So let's see what FSR 2.0 could do. And look at this, in the graphical options, we do have the ability to enable FSR disguised as DLSS, which we normally wouldn't have this option even available on this GPU. We're gonna turn on balanced and wow, that's a huge boost in FPS. I'm not getting double the FPS like Potato of Doom 1337 got, but I'm getting about 60% more performance. We went from about 22 FPS up to 35 FPS. That's the difference between unplayable and playable. And if we go down to Ultra Performance FSR 2.0, then we go up to 45 FPS, and it still looks pretty good. And we're running at 1440p here. 1440p is almost twice the resolution of 1080p. So if you were running this at 1080p, like you should on this GPU, then you get some really decent frame rates. You could enjoy 60 plus FPS or crank up the graphical settings, and you'd be doing way better than you would on native resolution. And the game looks good. Look at this. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I did notice some weird stuff. Only when the camera was stationary. But look here. Do you see what I see? See how when a figure moves through the space, it causes some like trails behind it? Almost like visual artifacts that take a second to disappear. I don't know if this was just due to the hacky nature of this mod, like if it was implemented by the developers, maybe it would work better. FSR 2.0 worked great in Deathloop. like I showed in my video, but I've heard some people complaining about this exact issue in God of War, that there was like some ghosting behind moving objects. It's not the end of the world. I'd probably still opt to play with higher frame rates even if there was some visual glitches, and the fact that FSR 2.0 works great in Deathloop means that the tech can be great, but it may require some fine-tuning by the developers that implement it to prevent some of the issues that might come up, which means extra work, which might be the reason why it's taking a while to be implemented in games. That's my theory, at least. Hopefully as the tech improves and the developers figure out how to use it better, then it'll become more common. For now, it's super cool that we have this first taste of the potential. FSR 2.0 was modded into a game that did not support it. That's a first of many, I hope. And Potato of Doom 1337 said that it could be done with other games. As always, our job as plebs is to wait patiently for the wizards to do their thing, and soon enough we'll reap the benefits. If you want to try out FSR 2.0 right now, I'll include a link to the mod in the description below, as well as my video explaining FSR 2.0 and showing you how it works at Deathloop. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. The question of the day: what game would you pick to have FSR 2.0 implemented in? I'd pick The Witcher 3, personally, but I'm curious to know what you'd say. Post your answer in the comments below. And while you're down there, click the thumbs up button if you like the video, or the thumbs down button if you didn't. Subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. As always, I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.